Now, in his State of the Province address, Eastern Cape Premier Oscar Mabuyane outlined 7 priorities that the province will focus on this year. They include creating an inclusive economy, providing quality healthcare and education, rolling out basic services such as water, roads and electricity, and building safer communities. The Premier also pleaded with traditional leaders and local municipalities to avail land to private investors for economic development to benefit the people. Well, let's speak to ActionSA's Eastern Cape chairperson Athol Trollip on his sentiments regarding the Premier's address. Mr. Trollip, appreciate your time this afternoon. Give us an overview of the Eastern Cape SOPA from your vantage point.
Good afternoon, Hugo. Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think I would like to commend the Premier. All the matters that he raised in his State of the Province address were issues that I'd highlighted the day before in a media conference. So I think he has a general knowledge of what's happening in the province. But the real challenge comes in how to fix that. So, you know, he started off by saying that he mentioned the Newzroom tragedy where 21 young kids were killed in a tavern. And he said he hoped that that should never happen again in the province. I think he forgot that that happened a few months ago in Hofmeyer again, where people died mysteriously in a tavern. And then he concluded in his speech to say that the province was going to build a forensic and DNA laboratory in the province and that it was soon to be operational. Now, I think that's long overdue because in the Newzroom tavern, for example, the parents of those children still don't know what their children died of, and that's more than a year ago. And also we've seen so many people getting off in critical court cases, especially where gender-based violence is concerned, because the DNA isn't processed or can't be forensically identified. And also the other big challenges with the South African police services who just don't collect DNA samples and forensic material properly. So crime is a big issue in the province, and he touched on that. And we in ActionSA believe that that will not be fixed until Cyril Ramaphosa, when he changes his cabinet, hopefully he will shuffle Bheki Cele right out of his cabinet, because I think that's where the rot stops in the police services. The Premier also, Hugo, mentioned the fact that they'd created 130,000 jobs in the last year. Now, you know, we need to create millions of jobs in this province because we have the highest unemployment rate. And unfortunately, the ANC has a schizophrenic relationship with business because those jobs were primarily created by business, not by the government. And we know that jobs are created by business and a growing economy and not by a government having a bloated bureaucracy. So I think he fell very short on that, and we have 50% unemployment with 70% youth unemployment, which is a crisis in this country. Then, of course, I'm going to have to follow up on this, but he said that the industrial parks in Butterworth, Port Jackson, Vulindlela, Komani and Dimbaza are all operational again, and they're in the process of being revitalized. I don't believe that that's actually so, but I have made a commitment that I'll go there in the next 2 weeks to go and visit for myself and see for myself, because all those factories were standing empty. They'd been vandalized, they'd been acid stripped, and it was a great tragedy because the greatest unemployment is in those areas where those factories are. And then, you know, my big passion is agriculture, Hugo, and I'm afraid the Premier fell well short in his discussions about what is going to happen in agriculture. He said, for example, that they as government want to source goods from local farmers, they want to massify production, they want to increase the livestock contribution to the GDP, and he said they want to build more infrastructure for emerging farmers. Now, and invest in grain production in the province. Now, that's all well and good, and he says that they're going to plant 27,000 hectares for crop production in the next year. But, Hugo, until the ANC government re-establishes proper agricultural colleges and sets up an extension service that can provide technical and management backup to emerging farmers, they just never are going to succeed. And I'm afraid there are no projects of success that the Premier can refer to. He did say that Magwa and Majola tea estates are on their way to becoming sustainable. Now, I want to tell you, I've been in the Eastern Cape in politics for the last 27 years, and those Magwa and Majola have been revitalized and resuscitated almost on a perennial basis and they are nowhere near being self-sustainable. So I want to go back there and have a look, and that's another commitment that I've made, that I will go back
Mr.
there
Trollip,
and look there.
Allow me to come in there, and let's talk about what the Eastern Cape seems to have gotten right. Now, I'm glad you agree that Mr. Mabuyane did well to identify several issues and deal with those issues. Well, one thing that they've gotten right certainly is tourism. Now, the growth of 700,000 in tourist arrivals are fantastic numbers, right? And he says, as a starting point, he also says they continue to prioritize the improvement of roads, such as the road to Hluleka Nature Reserve and some of the other newly gazetted roads from Giersville to Coffee Bay. Is this where he should be focusing his resources, do you think?
Hugo, first of all, let me just tell you, I live in this province and I travel every single day throughout this province. And the Premier's claiming that the road infrastructure is being fixed in this province is a far cry from the truth. Yes, he might be working on the Coffee Bay Road, and yes, he might be working on the Hluleka Road. But there are many, many other roads that are critical arterial roads for communities to access services and jobs and education in this province that are simply not trafficable. And I spent 2 years in agriculture before I got back into politics, and the road infrastructure is so critically bad that people that are producing primary products like citrus and other primary products that have to be transported to the ports, the fruit is being compromised before it even gets to the ports. And that brings me to the next point. When you get to the ports, the port of Mocha, a brand new port in the Eastern Cape, is the second worst performing port when it comes to performance and productivity. In all of the 151 ports that were evaluated by the World Bank, the three biggest ports in this country, Durban, Mocha, and Cape Town, were number 151, 150, and number 149. Now, that's a tragedy because we are a primary agricultural producing province, and most of that product is exported out of the port of Mocha, and the productivity at that port is so appalling that many ships just don't stop there anymore, because they have to pay demurrage and it takes too long to load those ships. But let me get to tourism, Hugo. I don't believe that this province has even touched or scraped the tip of the iceberg as far as the tourism potential is concerned. I agree with the Premier that flights into and out of this province are a real problem. We do not have adequate flights coming in from ORT or from Cape Town. And also, I take a city like Makanda, which used to be called Grahamstown. Now, it should be the Stellenbosch of the Eastern Cape, but it's actually the armpit of the Eastern Cape. It has the greatest tourism potential, probably of all the towns in the Eastern Cape, and it hardly has any tourists. It has great educational institutions, historical churches, it has the High Court, and it has the most incredible frontier war history that is far outsurpasses what happens in the battlefields in Colenso, but there they attract tourists. We don't attract tourists here. We have some of the best game reserves in the world, malaria-free, right close to the airport, but we do not attract the number of tourists that the Western Cape Garden Route does, for example. In fact, those Garden Route tourists should be coming to the Eastern Cape, but they don't come to the Eastern Cape, and that really needs to be focused on by this government. Is it about the roads?
Is it about the roads? Is it about a failure to communicate the message on what tourist attractions you have available in that province?
I think it's a number of things. First of all, I think there's a crime issue. There have been some heinous crimes happening in the Eastern Cape and, mass murders, and also some tourists have been involved in criminal activity. That turns tourism off. But the roads are really bad. Air flight access into the province is really bad. And then the roads are just not trafficable, and you need 4x4 vehicles to travel on many of these roads, and tourists don't have those kind of vehicles.
Yeah. Mr. Trollip, I'm afraid we're going to have to call time on this conversation, but certainly appreciate your time this afternoon. Athol Trollip, Eastern Cape, ActionSA's Eastern Cape chairperson. Appreciate your time this afternoon.